Okay, looks good. So, good morning once again. Today, my name is Byron Collins, and today I'll be presenting on securing the remote workforce. Uh, I am a cybersecurity systems engineer at Palo Alto Networks. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. I cover enterprise and large accounts in the Atlanta area. And so today I'm going to be speaking from some of my experience that I deal with my customers on a day-to-day, some of the customers I've dealt with just in general in the past, and then some of the trends that we see today around securing the remote workforce. Kind of what's happening in today's environment with COVID and everyone kind of working from home and being remote. It's a new day, and it's definitely changed the way that businesses are having to deal with where and how their workforce is able to uh, sign in and connecting the data and to get all those internal resources that before you only had a few people who might be outside of your network, who might be on perimeter, who might be on the remote side. Now, for most companies, almost everyone's on the remote side, and their entire workforce is going remote, right? So you went from maybe 20% remote to now you may have 80 to 100% remote, and it's really been a big change in the industry and for enterprises in general. Security has been extremely hard because it's been overnight pretty much. It happened really, really quickly, and a lot of companies just weren't prepared. I think as we look towards companies and what they're doing now, the shifts are being made, the changes are being made to be updated, and you'll see companies coming out with more and more things that really help them make it a better experience for both their employees and also for the enterprise as well, for securing all the data, all the exchanges, and everything that's happening for the employee and back for that company. So what's the main driver today when you look at securing that remote workforce is how do we stay out of the news, right? Every company I talk to, every company right now wants to make sure that they are not in the news. They do not want to be the next headline about a breach, data, the whole nine. It's just bad for business. It's bad for your brand. It's bad for your bottom line. It's bad for your future business. And it takes a lot of money, a lot of time and resources once it is that you've had some kind of breach or you're in the news, because you have to cover yourself on all bases across all pieces of your business and all lines of your business. You don't know where and how far the affecting that reach is, and so it's a really scary time for most businesses. They do anything they can to really stay out of this position. When you look at this, when you look at the secure and the remote workforce, the reason is because, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that an enterprise can do to secure themselves, right? They can put in firewalls, intrusion detection systems, URL filtering. They can do lots and lots of things, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, the weakest link in the whole organization are the people. People are the weakest link because you don't automate people. There's no script for people. You never know what's going to happen, right? There's social engineering. There's people giving passwords. There's so many different ways to involve when it comes to people that it makes it very, very hard to secure, right? It makes it hard to secure people and all the data and the endpoints because it will always be a trick pony, right? You will always just be under effect of you have to deal with what people are doing, right? And so because of that vulnerability, it's very hard for enterprises to think about how it is that they're going to secure their people and move forward, right? So one of the number one things that companies have to do is training. You have to train your people. You have to go through the scenarios. You have to send those emails. There's just a lot of things that you have to do to train your workforce to get them prepared for working remotely. There's a lot of different attack vectors when you're looking at the remote workforce, but more individually with people, it's about social attacks, right? It's about how it is that you're able to socially get things from people. What was your first pet's name? What high school did you go to? What's your mother's maiden name? All these are the things that are all part of that social engineering that we never even think about, right? What street do you live on? What was the mascot for your high school? I mean, these are things that come up, and we use them as these security questions, but we don't think about it being used against us, right? These are things that could come up in day-to-day conversation, even some of this information, and now it can be used as a social attack against you if you look at your passwords and other things of that nature, right? And then we've always seen is that malware, right? Malware, exploits, trojans, backdoors, all those things that we've been inherently always fearful of on an enterprise network that have been going on for a long time. But those are things that you usually feel like there are things you put in place. You put in antivirus, you put in firewalls, you put in SaaS solutions, multi-factor authentication. There's a lot of things that you would do to help secure yourself against malware and things of that piece. But when you have to look at the workforce and actual people, you have to think about that extra step, right? ransomware is huge right now. It's one of the number one proliferating things that you see in the market and industry today, because basically what they can do is send a phishing email or some kind of other social attack, and if they can land that ransomware, they can shut down an entire organization. So we're looking at those security fundamental problems. Once again, malware and exploits, so that's just touched on, and then also credential theft, right? People want to steal your passwords, your usernames. I know we feel like, oh, I have 1,000 passwords and usernames at every different system, but somebody wants those usernames. Somebody wants those passwords. Somebody wants to be able to get into access into the system that you're using at work, whatever you're using on the back end, your email, whatever it may be. I think a lot of us think day to day, I don't have any information or anything that someone would want. There's nothing that I have or that I'm tied to that would be a big deal. And unfortunately, that's not how it works, right? You do have things, right? You don't know how you're tied into work, to your bank accounts, to your credit cards. There's a lot of different ways that your information can be used. And once again, there's someone out there who wants it, who will find a way to use it. I like to always show this one because this is one of the number one things you hear complaints about on the workforce side is I have to change my passwords all the time. I have to constantly go in and update my passwords and change them every 2 months or whatever it may be. And passwords are one of the number one lines of defense when it comes to any system, anything on the enterprise network, right? When you look at this, it shows you how easy it could be to break passwords, and also you look at the different complexities of what's put in that password. Here lately, my company moved to an 11-character standard on the password. And if you look at that, and of course it has a mixture of lowercase and uppercase and numbers and symbols, as you see, it makes it really, really hard to think that someone would ever brute force that password. But as you see, the lower number of characters you have and the less complexity you have, a lot easier it could be to break that password. And we all know people who have passwords like password or things that are variations of that. Every year they do studies around that. And they show the huge amount of people who have what they consider to be weak passwords. Here, I think in the last year or two, you have seen a lot of things being implemented around making sure that you have a secure password. On your Apple devices now, it'll actually suggest a secure password for you. Or you can move to one on your own, but now you always see the rating around, is it a weak password? Is it average? Is it strong? And these things are important because you need a strong password, because brute force and password complexity is still one of the number one ways that people get into systems. It's one of the low-hanging fruits that's very, very easy. So password complexity is one of those ones that we have to be very diligent about, right? It should be one of part of our everyday hygiene for everything that has a password. For all of your email, for all of your credit cards, anything that you have to log in and have a password, you should do your best to implement as many characters and as many of the different variations as possible to make it strong. So the next part is really about what happens about your network. It's all about trust, right? It's all about being trusted and trusting your employee, trusting your workforce. And unfortunately, trust is a vulnerability, right? And this is a quote by a guy who came with the idea of a concept called zero trust. And he talks about how trust is a dangerous vulnerability that's exploited by the malicious actors, right? And malicious actors could be a lot of different people, right? I think when we think about that, we always think about some guy, dark in a corner, spying and looking at my network. And, that's not the case, right? Malicious actors could be a lot of different things in these days, but it really comes down to trust, right? Zero trust is the real concept. That means I trust no one. I trust nothing on my network unless I explicitly say I trust you. I must say I trust Sally specifically, not someone who works in Sally's group, because it's a big difference there. Threat landscape around that part and around trust, you can see here, cyber attacks are still done by outsider threats from your enterprise. But as you see, there's still a good proliferation of insider threats to your enterprise. So who the threat comes from, who's the actor, you just don't know, right? There could be someone outside, they've gotten someone from the inside because they've gotten a password, they've offered them money, as you can see here. Financial gain being one of the number one driving motivators. I can see that for a lot of people when, someone's like, hey, just let me log in with your username, or hey, plug this USB drive in, or, whatever else it may be. You just don't know, right? And so you have to protect yourself from the inside and from the outside. Once again, going back to this concept of zero trust. Zero trust is very, very important. And for anyone who works in kind of enterprise today, I'm sure you've been seeing much more stringent security measures come down around how it is that you access things on the network, how it is that you access your laptop, how it is that you access backend systems, because this is a strong piece now that companies are having to enact, because once again, before, usually a small part of your business were the remote workforce, and now a majority of your workforce is probably remote, right? And how is it that you handle that? So just to give an illustration here about zero trust and really what that looks like, and I'll build this out here. Here we're looking at the President Brigade as they're going down the street, and really kind of what's the process here, and what do you look for, and how is zero trust implemented in more of a physical perspective, and you'll think about it on a network perspective. So the first question is, who's the president, right? Who is the asset that you're trying to protect here? And here's the president. And that's want to know, where's the president, right? We assume he's in that car, he's in the one with the guys walking all around it. And then who should have access to the president, right? And right now it looks like no one should have access to the president, right? He's in the car, he's out from everyone else. You see that there is a fence, there's police, there's security. This is how you look at zero trust, right? No one is trusted in this picture except for those four gentlemen right around the car. And as you see, they're even on the outside of the car, right? That extra barrier of trust. So here you look at that perimeter, right? That outside barrier of people who are on the outside who might want to get in, and you see they have the police line there as well. You may look at your protect surface. Now your protect surface here we're talking about today is really the president and him being in the car, and we have controls who are built all around them. And here you see that micro perimeter, once again, the guys who are surrounding the car, which is that protect surface. And if you build it out more, you'll see you have monitoring tools there as well. So how do we look at this from a network perspective? What would you do here? So here in a network perspective, the president would be the data, right? It would be the data, and it would be your data center, right? This car would be the data center, which is protecting and holding your data. And the protect surface would usually be protecting your data center, and you have controls in, and you have a micro perimeter. And that micro perimeter in the past would be, are you at work, right? If you're in the office, if you're at work, if you're plugged in somewhere, if you're on internal Wi-Fi, then what we consider you to be is inside of this, inside of the perimeter, right? You're here, you're being monitored, but you're given full access to get that data, right? You're on the inside. But if you look at what we're doing today, things have switched. Where before, who was on the perimeter were just your small remote workforce, where today, most of your workforce is on the outside of that perimeter. So what you've changed here is, what does that protect surface look like now? And then what do those controls look like now? That perimeter is no longer a micro perimeter. That micro perimeter is now the perimeter. And so you have to think about that differently, right? Because before, if you wanted to control that data center, you have these controls that are tightly put around the data center in the micro perimeter and in your office. But now your office is no longer part of that micro perimeter because there's no one there. Everyone's at home. So everyone being at home needs to be part of how it is that they're part of that micro perimeter, and how do you put in controls so that they can access the data center. And this is the change that's happening right now for network administrators and cybersecurity professionals. Is this perimeter has definitely changed, and this landscape has changed. These four guys who are in place today who are being used as the controls, yeah, they work really well when you have this micro perimeter. But if you had to protect everyone along that gate, these four guys wouldn't be as effective, right? And this is where we have to look at, how do you do things to keep the same effectiveness while still having everyone on the outside of that perimeter, right? So this is the change that's happening today. This is what's happening when you're looking at securing a remote force today, different than if we look at even a year ago, right? Because of just, things that's happening in the world today. So what's the real benefit of moving towards zero trust? There's a couple, and I'll just build this out. When you look at zero trust and you implement this for the enterprise, it's the increased visibility. You must have visibility in place to be able to know who's accessing what and when, right? So you have to know who's accessing what data, where are they at. You want to be able to stop the malware propagation. Obviously cost savings, right? Because there's prevention involved. Obviously, you have to spend money to protect yourself, but then there's savings on the back end, by making sure that you're not having ransomware and other events, right? So there's a lot of pieces involved in this when you look across the board at what you get from the zero trust piece. Could it be used in place of a password like you have it? VPNs, yes. Richard, so yeah, so definitely that is one way to go about it, and you see that now, I think, in some of the more evolved and complex enterprises who are able to use something like that, some kind of authenticator in the place of VPN, right? I think as you look towards the future, passwords will pretty much go away, and we'll go passwordless. So when we talk about innovation, I do think that that's part of the innovative nature that should be coming forth is how do we kind of fix this password issue? Because it is a problem, right? It's a problem because even in your own internal enterprise, you may have 4 or 5 systems and a different password for each one, right? Maybe you're using MFA or something else, but passwords is a definite issue, right? And you start to see now with biometrics and other things with, thumb scanners and retinal scans and facial recognition and other things of that nature. But definitely the future is one where we go away from passwords, I believe. I think right now today has just been the way we've done it for so long, and there's still so much complexity around these other pieces like biometrics and other things that it's going to be hard to replace immediately. But obviously, the future is moving away from what we're doing in passwords, and, like you're saying for VPNs and such. Another good thing we look at VPNs, that you may see on that side is where there is the concept of creating a secure machine tunnel. So using certificates on your machine so that machine certificate is also another authentication piece beyond just you using your password to authenticate and be able to get back onto the network. So I think you're starting to see this as you look at endpoints and rollouts about how it is that we're trying to identify the machine as well as the user to make it just another step in the level of how do we get away from just relying on passwords and someone possibly brute forcing your password or stealing your password or whatever else it may be, right? So it's very interesting as we move forward, how that's going to look. But no matter what it is, obviously we're going to look, I think everyone's going to look towards this zero trust and how it is that we implement zero trust. And that's just one more piece of how we do that. So here I just want to touch a little bit on obviously the economic value piece from the business. This is really just talking to the fact of that prevention is always best, right? I saw a meme on LinkedIn where it showed the budget for cybersecurity before a breach and it was pennies. And then the budget for cybersecurity after a breach and it was just money everywhere, right? It was just money stacked on top of money because once you have a breach, I mean, there's nothing else you can do. You have to fix it. And for most companies, they just throw money at it, right? I mean, there's really no other answer. If you look at some of these statistics, it's costly, right? It's not cheap to handle a breach, right? No matter what type of attack it is, phishing or 0-day or ransomware, right? I think the one that we see more now prevalent than anything else is ransomware. Ransomware is huge. And I think, once again, as we look across businesses, no business is too small, right? If you're a business and you're up and running, there's someone who wants to profit off of that. And that could be by taking you down or locking you up or taking your precious IP, whatever it may be. But the economic value here is huge, right? And so it's always nice to try to show this beforehand and say, this is why you invest in your IT team. This is why you invest in your cybersecurity professionals so that you don't have to worry about looking at numbers like this, right? So you don't have to overnight incur a $500,000 charge because you had a phishing campaign or something like that. So, I mean, when you look at these kind of numbers, you really need to hit home for a lot of businesses because, it's going to happen quickly, right? There's nothing you can really do. Once you're in it, you're in it. So really here, when you look at the enterprise and the organization, these are really the goals of historically how it is that you want to protect your enterprise and use that zero trust, right? So you always want to focus on those critical applications, Salesforce, Calidus, whatever those critical applications in your business, you want to make sure those are secure, right? You might want to put MFA on those. You might want to have all kind of other authentication that you use those critical applications, and that's what you will first focus on. And then you will look at where that data resides. Now, you look at this slide here. I kept this here on purpose because historically you would say my data resides in the data center or it resides in the cloud, on-prem or in the cloud somewhere. And these are really the two places. Well, now, today, and even in the past, but more than ever, the data is everywhere. The data is at your house, right? Everyone's on a laptop and everyone has that data at your house, right? There's a hard drive and that data is sitting there somewhere. For most people, they have data on their machine, and that means that that data is out somewhere. It's with you at your home. If you're out going to Starbucks, if you're working remotely, somewhere not at home, that data is with you, and it still has to be protected. It has to be protected when you're on public Wi-Fi. It has to be protected when you're on a hotspot, and this is really the crux of the situation is how is it that a company can protect and cover all these vectors? And the answer is it's really difficult to do that. A big part of it is, once again, employee training, making sure that your employees are up to speed and have a full understanding of what you're trying to accomplish and what needs to be done. So that they'll make sure they're not just jumping on any old Wi-Fi when they're out in public. They're not just opening any old email when they're checking their email, right? They're being very stringent and diligent about the things that are happening on the network and being good stewards of that. And that will always pay dividends for you on your network, right? So when you look at your Protect surface, it has broadened, right? The Protect surfaces everywhere now, right? Who are allowed users, what is an inappropriate action? That's harder to tell right now because inappropriate action before could be someone accessing a file at 11 o'clock at night, but now that you're working from home, maybe you access files at 11 o'clock at night all the time because this is the better schedule for you. Maybe before you had to use some intermediary and you would let them upload and download files for you, and now maybe you're doing that yourself and that looks suspicious, right? So I think you even have to rethink as a company, what's normal, what's the regular, because our normal is very different from a business perspective because, once again, no one's at work, no one's actually in the office for the most part, and so that changes everything around your perimeter. That changes everything about what you thought about your data, right? And so once again, you have to think about what's happening on your network and how to protect against that malware and those easy things, but then also the things that you're not thinking about, those organizations and parts of your network that you think are not at risk, right? People maybe think, oh, my finances or oh, my intellectual property. And it's like, yeah, those are the places that people definitely want to hit first, but there's other parts of your network that are very vulnerable that people look at as well, right? Because they're able to pivot and do lateral movement once on your network. So just an example here around how it is that you would look at as a company at zero trust, right? You want to know everything about who, what, when, where, why, and at the end you want to know how and then what the action is, right? Is it something that you're allowing? Is it something that you're blocking? This is what your company is doing to everyone who's working remotely today. This is the information they want to know all the time about any information, any data that's being accessed. This is what's happening on the back end. And I show this because a lot of people don't realize that no matter what you're doing on your computer, someone's logging it, someone's looking at it. They want to understand what's happening from your endpoint, right? And if you expand this, you can take it even further from that basic view to a true company example where you might get a little bit more integral around which applications, which servers, which users, which databases. This is the part that gets really important because you want to be super granular around who can access what pieces here, right? And so hopefully you've seen, since everyone's going remote, the difference and changes around who can access what and new security implementations being rolled down because companies are having to look at this a little bit more stringently than they did before. Because before, once again, they knew where you were sitting, they knew where your machine was, they knew what you were accessing. It was very, very easy. Well, now you're coming in over a line that they're not used to seeing off of a computer, off of a network they're not used to, and it just changes things. So here we're talking about how it is that we defend against successful attacks. So once again, I just want to touch a little bit more on some of the top threats that you're going to see when you're talking about the remote workforce. Phishing is getting more and more sophisticated. It's becoming very, very hard to distinguish real emails from fake emails. I run into it myself all the time. If you ever get one that's from Netflix or Amazon, I've had one from my car. I mean, you look at some of these emails now, I mean, it's almost impossible sometimes to differentiate them. You have to go very, very carefully. So the sophistication around that is definitely growing. Ransomware strategies, once again, ransomware is huge. It's only on the rise. I don't see that changing anytime here soon, especially when you look at things like cryptocurrency and the ability to get that money out of the enterprise by some form of cryptocurrency, and still being able to be disguised and continue working. I think this is a huge problem. Crypto jacking, for anyone who doesn't know, this is where the hackers are using basically your backend servers, your computers, and basically use that to farm cryptocurrency and things of that nature. And so they're using your resources on the back end to do some of these things. state-sponsored attacks, IoT attacks. Now, IoT attacks is one that's very, very big when you start talking about being at home, because when you're at home, there's a lot of things that are being on your network, right? If you have a Ring device, if you have a Sonos device, if you have a smart TV, smart refrigerator, stove, there's so many things that are part of that attack surface now from an IoT device standard that people just don't think about, but they need to, right? Because, you know, one of the newest ones that I've read up a lot about here lately is automobiles. Automobiles are getting really, really smart these days. There's computers all throughout them, and the IoT attacks on automobiles, they say in the future, could be huge, right? Once again, we're talking about the remote workforce. If you're using your computer, you're using your car, you're using some kind of third-party Wi-Fi, this could be a concern in the future. I don't think we're really there today, but I think as enterprises are maturing and we're looking at more and more of what we're doing as pushing data out, BYOD and things of that nature, these will be a concern, right? Because you'll get phone calls on your car, you'll get emails in your car possibly, and there's possible ways that someone could maybe back in that and get pertinent information, right? And that's really some of the future things that we have to worry about here. One that I want to touch on that's really important is third parties. That is one of the number one things that companies are worried about when you look at this remote workforce. The majority of your remote people before were these third parties, right? It were the vendors, it were the contractors, and maybe your salespeople who were internal. But third parties, when you look at it, is a huge risk of concern for almost any huge breach you've seen or heard in the last few years here. It may have started or been part of some vendor access, some vendor sign on, some vendor not being locked down like they should have been, some contractor or anything like that. And this is a huge concern as well, right? So when you think about the remote workforce, and you're thinking about, you know, how can we innovate? It is how can we come up with better ideas and ways to lock down those third parties, to train people to be better around social engineering. And then the last thing here you see is around a severe shortage of cybersecurity professionals. I think that right there is a problem for almost any organization. They just can't keep their cybersecurity people. There aren't enough security people to go around. There's a huge shortage. And so that in itself is very scary for a company, right? Because if you don't have enough people, if you don't have the right people, how is it that you're going to protect yourself and protect your organization when you don't even have the right team to do that for you, right? So it doesn't matter if you have all the different systems in place. If you don't have the right people in place, it's going to hurt you. And right now, cybersecurity is in huge demand, and so companies are really struggling with keeping the right people. So who's the adversary? It's not some magical future robot. It's once again not some dark cloaked individual on the dark web. You know, today it's really the pragmatic adversary, right? And what does that really mean? It's really more about a person who wants to get in and get out. People think about hackers, and they think about this whole concept of being breached as, you know, I think we see it in movies a lot. It just kind of gives it a certain spin, when in reality, it can take years, months, years sometimes. Sometimes it can be really quick, but usually they're very, very well thought out and planned out. Someone's going to get in, get what they need, and get out, right? And the whole thing to do is to do it undetected, right? You usually want to get in and get out without anyone ever knowing, so that you could have grabbed everything and undetected. Maybe you can get back in and get some more. We really just don't know. But, you know, really, this is really the person who we have to be concerned about, because this is the adversary that's really hurting you, right? How is it that they could be in your network for a while? How is they could do lateral movement in your network? You know, these are all things to be concerned with. And so how is it the company is going to look at this? Is they're going to wonder, how can we go through what we call the cyber attack kill chain? As you see here, the intrusion kill chain. So there's 7 phases here. And this is what, as a business, you're looking at as to stop some kind of attack. This is what they're looking at for you as a member of the workforce, and how it is that I protect the business, is because these are the 7 phases that someone would have to go through to really attack our business, right? To get data out of it and kind of have a successful attack. You have to go through all of these different pieces, right? Reconnaissance, that could be just sweeps. That could be being very targeted at our business. It could be healthcare, maybe. There are a lot of different ways to do the reconnaissance piece. The weaponization, once again, that could be done through phishing emails, that could be done through documents, as you see, Microsoft Office documents and files. There's a lot of different ways that you can look from weaponizing it. Delivery. Well, I can think mostly just about emails and things of that nature, but it can also be things like USB drives, right? People don't think about that. People drop and leave USB drives in parking lots and in convenience spots at work, just hoping that someone will take that USB drive and plug it into a computer, and then you'll be compromised, right? Like you see these different steps that someone has to go through at the exploit you, at the install, command and control, and then the last one is exploitation of data, the actions objective, right? Whatever the objective may be. The objectives can be many different things because the objective is not always to steal that data. Sometimes the objective is to get deeper and deeper into your organization so that I can get the better data, right? Not the low-hanging fruit, but maybe the intellectual property if you're a big company and it's worth millions to you. Social security numbers, things of that nature. Healthcare records, right? So there's a lot of different objectives when you look at this. There's not one size fits all when you're looking at an attack or a breach. The good thing is on our side is that you really only have to stop it in one place. So once again, innovation is constantly being done around where and how can you stop this in a different section. There are companies built around each and every one of these pieces of the kill chain. And they specialize in doing one thing, stopping this at this one particular piece. And that makes it at least so that you can understand how it is that you can be successful to stop it. But it makes it very hard because there's many different ways to go through this kill chain. And so there's many different ways for you to try to stop it, right? And so it is difficult to understand and cover all your bases, but this is really the side of what we're trying to do and trying to lock things down and secure every piece of this remote kill chain. So as you look through here, you look through the life cycle, every part that's usually a part about the remote workforce is usually here on the reconnaissance side, right? Because I have to figure out how do I get to you, the individual, because you are usually going to be my easiest door in. No matter what that is, once again, the email, the USB, the password, there's some way that I want to get to you as the end users and do that reconnaissance because you are going to be my easiest way in, right? And this, once again, goes from that unauthorized access to unauthorized use once I'm into the network. And this is really the span as the person tries to get your data, tries to get into your network, and tries to have a successful breach. Here's just an example of how one of these would happen. The attacker would send that phishing email. They would exploit a document. They might put in some kind of backdoor Trojan, which would give them backdoor access. Once again, it's usually about access to the network. Usually access is the first number one thing that has to be done, and then they'll figure out from there what it is they really want to do, right? And then here you see here they have a decoy document that's going to be used again and again to be pushed out throughout your network. You'll share it, you'll copy it, whatever it may be. They'll put in a shared drive, maybe other people will open it. But this is really the objective here, and kind of how it is that they're able to weaponize and deliver things like this is simple examples here like a document. We look at our cyber hygiene, always update your antivirus, always update your software, use MFA or multi-factor authentication when possible. Hopefully you're seeing a lot of companies doing more and more of that. Strong passwords are huge. And once again, we think about innovation, think about opportunity. How do we make this process easier? How do we make the MFA process easier? How do we make the password process easier? How do we make it easier for people to be trained on not clicking certain links, not opening emails they don't trust? How do we make sure that person knows if a password has been changed and they don't know it? I mean, it's just many, many layers of the hygiene that's going to help secure the workforce remotely until we can get back into the office. But as we know, this remote workforce thing is going to probably last from here on out. So how do we handle this moving forward? And I think there's never been a better time to have a new company to innovate with a new idea, because companies are scrambling on how is it that they're going to secure this workforce that's in a scenario that's never been before. So once again, how are we going to do that? Employee training. I put that there twice on purpose. It is huge. You have to train your employees. You have to make them involved in a part of the effort. They must know what's happening. If you don't do that, they will always be the easiest door into your network. And this is why securing the remote workforce is so hard, because you could do all these other things underneath really carefully, right? You could do MFA, you could do the password manager, you got a really good firewall, you could do an EDR solution, but employees must be trained, because even though there are holes in 3 through 7, usually there's other things. There's insurance and there's, guarantees and SLAs and other things, right? But from the employee perspective, there's nothing around that, right? So employees have to be a part of the process all the way through. So that's really all I had today. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Here's my LinkedIn. Sorry, I don't have any other real social media, but I am on LinkedIn a lot. If there's any other questions, I'm here to answer and help any way that I can. And I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Byron. I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it, Richard. I'm glad to see it was informative. I hope so. I try. We do this all day, so whatever we can do. There were some really good sessions I attended yesterday as well, so this has been a really good conference for me so far. I really appreciate you guys putting this on. I've really enjoyed myself. Yeah. So endpoint security is huge, right? You'll see a number of different solutions around how it is that you lock down the endpoint, right? And that could be your laptop, that could be your mobile phone, maybe your tablet. I think as we move towards the future, we'll see a change in how it is that we access or allow mobile devices. I actually think this remote working will minimize BYOD. I think BYOD will start to go down because it's too hard to secure against BYOD for a lot of organizations. It's easier to just give you a corporate laptop, a corporate phone, wherever else it may be, then they can control everything. Where if you have some kind of BYOD device, you don't know exactly. You have to be very stringent around which OS, which application, all those kind of things. So I think that you will see for the ones who do allow BYOD that it will be opt-in. But I'm sure they'll say if you want to be able to get on our corporate network, there won't be a choice. You have to have these certain things, right? And for a lot of places, that's called a HIP check, a host information profile, and that's what it'll go through and say, do you have this OS? Do you have this antivirus? Do you have this protection? And if you don't have that, you can't get access, right? So I think you'll definitely see that change how we do BYOD here in the future and how we allow different devices on our network. A specific way of protecting IoT wearables from breaches? No, not really. Right now, luckily, you have to hope that the OS from whatever manufacturer that you get is really good. IoT is very new in the enterprise space, so I think you've seen IoT more on the consumer space for a long time, but there's no standardization on the consumer side space. There's many different protocols, many different brands. You're talking about iOS brand, an Android brand, and I think it makes it really hard to protect yourself from that perspective because there's not a lot of things in place to help you manage and track those BYOD devices from a consumer perspective to lock them down anymore. Because usually the manufacturer takes away all of your capabilities to really do any kind of protection to lock it down, right? To add any additional capabilities or functionality. And once again, as we move to the future, I think you'll see there will be more and more of this security pushed to the home, especially from your service provider and your internet provider, to give you greater security at home. And I think you'll see that pressure come from the enterprise who can't afford to always send every employee home with every piece of everything. I think in the future, you'll see some kind of service provider buyback, kickback program with companies to help provide that extra level of security at the home. Just my own thoughts. But we'll see what happens in the market. It's an interesting time right now. So I think I'm coming up at the end of my time here now, end of the session. Any more questions? Anything else for me? Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Derek, are you still on? Should I still stick around and sit here, or something else I should do. Now I think it's at the end of my time. Okay, I guess that's it for me. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. Have a good day. Hopefully, I'll see you next year.